you were making all these YouTube videos, and we were all excited about Punch a Bunch, right? And then you released Punch a Bunch, and then it was kind of less and less and got more and more quiet.
Yeah.
And so the question is, and I do not blame you at all, and I don't blame like Jonas Tyroller. He doesn't post as much anymore. Danny, who knows where Danny went, right?
Danny is on an island celebrating.
The question is, did you stop making YouTube videos because it wasn't necessary? And that's okay, by the way. I'm not judging you, or I might do it too, like if I reach escape velocity. But I would love to know, is that one of the reasons you just found success?
So I just want to kind of give context to people, because a lot of people, I think, was like, oh, you just came out of nowhere and it was just like an overnight success. No, I failed miserably so many times at a bunch of other stuff, you know? So it was really just like the YouTube channel, and what I did with it in the end was like kind of like my final push. It was like, I was this close to giving up and just being like, you know, it's probably better if I just stick to my job. I make a lot of money and it's fine, right? And I was good at it. I was really good at it. I mean, I think people told me I was, and I was climbing the ladder very quickly. And that's a different story. Like why I saw someone on Twitter was asking like, why did you leave your career? It seemed like you enjoyed it. And that's, I guess, a different story. But short story, I didn't enjoy it anymore. And I didn't want to get promoted because like when you're in a job, when you get a promotion, you double your responsibilities and you make 4% more money. That makes no difference in your life. So I just felt like, why should I work double as hard to make not more? Like, it just doesn't seem fair. Not that everything is about money, but I felt very, very capped. Like,
sure,
you know. But yeah, so what we were kind of thinking, me and my wife, were like, well, you know, it really isn't about how much money you make, it's about how much money you spend, so low cost. Our goal, so we used to live in Vancouver, and I don't know if you know, but Vancouver is one of the most expensive cities in the world.
Oh, I know. One of my team members lived there and he had to move because I guess I wasn't paying him enough, and he had to move because it was so expensive.
Yeah, you gotta pay him a lot if he wants to live there. So it's really expensive, and we were trying to buy property there because our long-term goal was like, well, here's the thing, rent was just going up like crazy, right? And so it felt super unsafe to be renting, especially in a city like Vancouver, because you're constantly on this treadmill of having to spend. I think we were spending $2,400 a month at the time, and that was pre-2020, and I'm sure that would be like $3,500 now, right, in rent, and that's like a lot of money, right? So
sure,
our goal basically was to buy a property and then somehow pay it off, right? We didn't want to have a mortgage because then your expenses go down to almost zero. Like, you know, you pay property tax here in Canada, but yeah, so the plan was basically move out of the city, move to here in this middle of nowhere place, but be able to own our house. And we did that. And so now we don't have basically any expenses. All we got to buy is food. And if I ever stop making money, then it will be very, very easy to just cut expenditure to almost zero. And so have I reached escape velocity? Yeah, absolutely. I think so. But it's not because I make a ton of money. It's because I don't spend money, right?
Yeah. No, that makes complete sense. Okay, so the YouTube channel got you there.
Yeah.
Because, well, that's a big question, right? There's this big, giant question mark over the YouTube, like, game developer devlog space, which is it actually worth it to do devlogs to, in the end, the dirty little secret is everyone's promoting their game and getting wish lists that way. So my question to you is, did YouTube get you where you are now? Or was YouTube actually kind of a waste of time? We're going to get back to the conversation really quick. I did want to let you know, if you want to make a 3D game and, well, you don't really know how to start and you want to jump into Unity and make a game in 15 minutes, I'm actually going to do that. I can show you how to do that. It's totally free, little workshop below. So click below, sign up while you're listening to this podcast, and you'll get instant access and learn how to make a game in 15 minutes. It's actually really fun. It's taught by me. So anyway, I just want to let you know. Thanks. Let's get back to the conversation with Ponty. Let's go.
No, man. YouTube is the only reason I am where I am. Asterix. If you make devlogs on YouTube, the ad revenue is garbage. You can get sponsors, but I don't like sponsors. And I was like, I did a couple of them, and it was just like, I'll do sponsors if I have to. And the moment I don't have to do sponsors anymore, that is it. And so I don't do sponsors anymore. And I don't do videos anymore, as you might have noticed. So I'll answer your questions in a moment about where I'm at with YouTube. But I think it's important for people to take a very level-headed approach to game development and understand that it is extremely hard. It's not for everyone, and that's okay. Like, it's just not for everyone. And if you just want to make a bunch of money, then, you know, become a banker or something. You'll make way more money and it'll be way easier, right? Like, it's just not very good for making money. At the same time, you know, there's a lot of game developers out there that make a lot of money, so it's a bit of a weird one. But the question I guess you're asking is making devlogs worth it? So in my experience, what I have learned from YouTube is kind of how humans interact with media, and like it really taught me how short people's attention span is, what is entertaining or not, you know, these things I had never really thought about. And, you know, after kind of figuring out like, okay, I kind of get it, right? Like, how do you keep people's attention for a certain amount of time? I was able to then take what I learned there and put it in the climbing game. It's taught me a lot about like just, you know, about the whole dynamic between content creators and their audience, and kind of what they think about when they're making content, right? And that allowed me to make the climbing game. But I don't want it to sound like I just made it just to make money. Like, that game has been... I remember when I played Bennett Foddy's game back in 2017, when it just came out, and I was just like, holy crap, I love this. Like, I actually loved it. Everybody says it's like, oh, they hate the game. No, I love it. It's one of my favorite games. I just love it. I thought it was so interesting. Like, dude, like the hammer, how it's like, and I remember like when I just started learning Unity, I tried so many times to recreate it, and I just couldn't understand how it was done. Like, it just felt so unique. Sure. And like you mentioned, that Punch a Bunch and the climbing game are sort of different, but they are also kind of similar in the sense that I guess what really motivates me is trying to come up with interesting controls in games, right? Yeah. Like Punch a Bunch has a very unconventional control scheme. Because you kind of lean the upper body with one stick, and then that determines how you punch. Like, it's not just like press X to punch, right? I mean, I did in the end have to implement that because people didn't understand how to play it. So I learned a lot from that. Like, don't make weird, complicated games that people don't understand. But, you know, and that kind of carried over to the climbing game, where I was like, I wanted to make something that felt intuitive but still felt unique. Like, I didn't just want it to be like, oh, hold up to climb, right? Like, that's not interesting, to me at least. So the whole climbing game has been in the back of my mind for many years, and so it was my dream game, I guess, a little bit, but it was a calculated dream game.
But it wasn't so calculated of thinking, well, I want to make a ton of money from streamers playing this game, but because you did mention that it wasn't your end all be all goal. But do you feel like, I guess a big question here that a lot of people are probably wondering is, should streaming be some sort of foundation for your game? If you want to make money and you want to do well, is thinking of streamers while you're creating your game, is that important?
I mean, it can be, right? It can be. I don't think it's necessary. But you have to have some sort of marketing for your game, right? Like, and I think that's also like a big bad word, marketing. But I think people don't really think about marketing in in the right way. I think when you hear the word marketing, people go like, ah, la, 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 la. That's just making trailers and getting a publisher and then paying for ads. That's not really, I mean, yes, that's a form of marketing, right? But put it this way, anything that convinces a player to press the buy button on your game is marketing. So whether that's like a screenshot on Steam or a little tagline you put in your Steam description or a streamer playing your game, that's all marketing, right? Like even the graphics of your game is marketing. It's conveying something to the player that makes them want to play your game. And I don't think it's a word that should be, it's not a bad word. It's just, it's a very broad term. So you have to have some sort of marketing for your game. Like you have to have something that makes the player want to play the game, right?
Sure.
Does it, because I think like Jonas's game, Thronefall, I don't think a ton of streamers played that as far as I know. And that sure made a lot of money. So, I mean, I don't think it's necessary to have streamers play your game, but it is a way to get exposure for your game, right?
Sure. Well, I'm looking it up here. Let's take a look so that we can fact check ourselves in real time.
Sure, yeah.
Thronefall, Let's Play. So I'm just looking at YouTube. We've got a pretty good amount of streaming actually.
Oh yeah?
From Thronefall. Oh yeah. There's one here that's got 296,000 views. Oh no, they made a cartoon out of it. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much all over YouTube. I don't know if it's like blowing up like a lot of other streamable games, like yours, for example. Like if I look up yours here, a difficult game about climbing, I would say that your game is much, much more streamable. I mean, you've got Markiplier, for God's sake. Yeah. 4.4 million views. By the way, how did that feel when you found out he played?
I think he cheated.
Wait, what?
I think he cheated. You look at the last episode and the arms go like wonkier and wonkier and wonkier the more he plays, and I was like, oh my god, I had a bug in the game and blah 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 blah. I was like looking like frantically like, what happened? How did it break? And then I noticed that when speedrunners were playing the game and they were using like these save states to like cheat so that if you fall you get to teleport back, some of them weren't programmed right, and so it shifted the way things look. So I think he cheated.
All right, Markiplier, if you're listening right now, you got some,
I don't know, man.
Some questions to answer.
But I'm not sure. I can't confirm. But it could just be that I programmed the game bad. It's just that I have watched a lot of people stream that game, and I have never seen that before. So I was like, what is going on here? I think he cheated.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, obviously we're looking at, that's so funny. We're looking at your just crazy views for your game. And so the marketing of this game was, am I correct in saying it was 100% driven by streaming, correct?
Yeah.
Did you also, you took advantage of the YouTube devlogs for Punch a Bunch to get wish lists, but it didn't seem like you used YouTube to market the difficult game about climbing. So my question for you is, it seems as if the devlogs on YouTube weren't really that valuable as a marketing tool. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I guess that goes back to a previous question as well, just like a more broad question, like is making devlogs, good on YouTube? And I kind of went off on a tangent saying that, I learned a lot from making them, but is it good to get wish lists from devlogs? Depends. If you're Danny, yeah, absolutely, you're right. But like I think there are two types of devlogs. There's one type of devlog, which is something that, for example, DevDuck is doing. You know DevDuck, right? Hey, you should get him on the podcast.
Oh, I will.
Sorry, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I would watch that podcast. I like DevDuck. Yes. He's one of the reasons I started doing this in the first place, because I was like, dude, this is cool. I like this. I can do this. I can do this stuff.
Oh, yeah. No, definitely going to get him on. I'm going to do my best at least, so we'll see.
Yeah. But anyway, but here's the thing, right? Like his videos appeal to game developers, and game developers are going to wish list your game, but they're not going to buy it. And that's the problem. So like when you make devlogs, you're appealing to developers. And when you're making video games and you want to sell them, you don't want to appeal to game developers. You want to appeal to gamers, and gamers don't watch devlogs. So you have a bit of a problem there. I think that there's definitely a beautiful community in the YouTube world with devlogs now, and it's becoming more and more, every year. And I think it's awesome for getting feedback, and it's great to just kind of get your stuff out there and get people to look at it. I think it's great for that, but it's not a good way to get wish lists.
Yeah, I agree.
Or to get players to look at your game.
But it really does, doesn't it? It really does come down to the angle. Like, are you making edutainment, like really funny, silly videos that kind of just peel back a layer of development, but primarily it's just for gamers who just want to be interested in your game.
Yeah.
That's one kind of content. Danny does it really, really well.
Yeah.
And I feel like you kind of did content like that.
I tried. I desperately tried to make funny videos, but the problem is, like, look, man, it takes a long time to make games, especially if you're alone, and making devlogs that are fun to watch take even more time. So I was like, I'm going to make a video a week, and it just turned into like this clown show, and I feel like I wasn't genuine, and I feel like it was just like, I was like, what is this? But people liked it, and they were like, dude, Ponty, whoo, more devlogs. And it was like, I don't know, man. And so I remember at the end of Punch a Bunch, and so Punch a Bunch was my first game, right? And the reason I made that project was because I wanted to learn how to make games, and I was like, I'll just document it on YouTube as I learn, right? But many times during the developments, like, I think I'm gonna just scrap this game and make a real game, because I felt like it wasn't good. It didn't turn out the way I should have done. Way more prototyping, but people were like kind of hyped up about it, which was kind of weird. I was like, well, people really seem to want this game. So I think I'd been developing for 2 years, and I just felt like I wasn't making progress because I was just making videos instead. And I had quit my job because I was like, I'm gonna have like the YouTube income pay for my bills. And it did a little bit. Yep. Also, my wife was, she started a completely different, she started a home decor website, which started making a ton of money. And so I could kind of relax and be like, well, okay, we have enough money, right? We bought this house, we paid it off, and we had savings from before, right? So it's like, this was all according to the plan. Like, we wanted to have no expenses so that I wouldn't need to make a bunch of money. And so I was like, well, I think I'm going to finish this game. I was at a crossroads where it was like, either I just go all in on YouTube and just make that a thing, and maybe I'll just scrap the whole game development thing, or I'll go all in on game dev and just make way fewer videos. So the problem with devlogs is that you're looking at other YouTubers, like I don't know, PewDiePie, Markiplier, these people. I mean, I guess not PewDiePie, he retired, but like YouTubers, they make like 1 or 2 videos a day, or 1 video a week if they're on a really slacky schedule, right? Like 1 video a week is like in the YouTube space is like nothing. So you as a developer feel like, I gotta make a video a week, right? And so then it becomes like, well, I didn't make any progress on my game this week because I was editing my video, so I guess I'll just make like top 10 assets on the Unity store instead, right? And so it just becomes like you're fetching for content, and nobody wants to watch that, right? But I think that when you're in that loop, you kind of lose track of what people actually want to watch. And so you just kind of do anything to just get an upload in, right? While you're not working on your game. But there are examples of people that make a video every 6 months or a year or whatever, and they get lots of views, but they spend a lot of time on the video. So it's like, well, what if I could do something like that instead? Because like look, man, like nobody cares if you added a health bar to your game. That's just how it is. Like if you're like, oh, look, this week I added a health bar and I made it wiggle a little bit when you lose health, right? Like it's not interesting to anyone really, because like a real developer will be like, yeah, that's very trivial. And someone who is aspiring to be a developer, they want like big, like, oh, dude, like I made a game in 2 days, right? Like that's what they want to see. And real developers know that's bullshit, right? So
well, this is why I stopped doing devlogs, and people listening right now are like, well, then why does Thomas do YouTube content like about game devs? And for me, it's like, well, number one, I love doing it, and I love talking to developers like you, but also I have an educational platform and program, and that's how I bring that. So I run multiple businesses. I've got my game studio, and then I also have an educational platform where I teach about game dev. So my target market is not game. Like, I'm not trying to sell my games on my channel. And so I think that confuses a lot of people when they see me constantly uploading videos. They're thinking, well, why is he not trying to get wish lists? And I'm like, that's not what this channel is for. And I was talking to, in a previous conversation, I talked with Chris Sikowski, and he was like, the best way to get wish lists is streamers. It's not your devlogs. Your devlogs will help. Like, they might get you to like 10,000, maybe 20,000 wish lists, and that's a good thing. And I think it's a great start. But you're not going to get those gangbusters like 100,000 wish lists from devlogs unless you're Danny. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, but I think it's important to kind of establish and say that, look, Danny wasn't making devlogs, right? Because nobody else is getting those results. And if you look at Danny's videos, they're not really devlogs. They're entertainment videos that work. Like, they're sort of like, and that's, I guess, like, we're jumping around a little bit, but that's sort of what I tried to do with the climbing game, that I thought of it like, this is not a devlog. This is something that is accompanying the game. It's something that is lifting the game up. Like, it's part of the experience of the game. Because and this was actually my wife's idea, and it was a great idea. So thanks, Viv. But in the menu of my game, there's like a little button that says like, watch how I made this game. And you click on it and it takes you to the video. And most huge streamers, like Ludwig, for example, saw that button and were like, hey, let's check this out. And he watched the entire video on stream and was like, found it to be very funny. I was like, oh, and because I made some jokes like, oh, you're probably gonna fall here, but whatever. And then he was like, like, he felt like kind of mocked by the video. And so I think it really felt fun to watch the video, especially after you had played the game a little bit. But if I had made a video where I was like, okay, now I'm going to start by programming here, and I'm going to add this line of code here, like, they would click off the video in 2 seconds, right? So that's why I think, like, so I guess that's you. So your question is like, where am I at with YouTube right now? So yeah, so anyways, so I started making fewer videos of Punch a Bunch, and I was like, I'm only gonna make a video when I actually have a lot of progress, so that I have something to talk about, and where I can like sort of talk about it in an entertaining way without getting like too nerdy, right? So that anyone could watch and be like, oh, hey, this is like so cool, like, you're making a game. Sure. And I feel like I'm kind of with you on the journey, without having to be super technical, right? So it feels more like an entertainment thing than anything else.
Right.
And that's when my views started really going up. Like, up until that point, and you can really see it on my channel too. Like, you can see the thumbnail. It's like basically when I start with black text in the middle, that's when I totally shifted my mindset for YouTube. And I was like, I'm going to try to make videos that are fun to watch and that have a lot of like content, and not just a bunch of jokes and stuff, right?
Well, were you shifting your target market for your videos? Is that what you're doing? You're deciding, you know what, I'm going to go after the gamers and not the developers?
I guess something in the middle at the time. I was like, well, I clearly there's a hunger to watch interesting videos about game development, because I like Sebastian Legou, for example, he was getting millions of views on some of his videos, and I was like, I'm getting 20,000 views, which means that, it's just, the videos were just getting pushed to the same people. And because they were so granular, it was like you had to have watched everything before to kind of understand what was going on. And you just end up in this like sort of circle of yourself, like only your own videos recommend your videos. And so I was like, well, I need to make more open-ended videos that have like a start, a middle, and an end that is like, okay, this video, I'm gonna make music for my game. And then it's like, start, I learned to make music, bought that keyboard, and at the end of the video, I actually had some music, and it was like sort of self-closing. And so that sort of became my strategy for making videos. And I think people really started enjoying them more because it felt more satisfying to watch them. They felt like, they could follow along and they understood what was happening, instead of like being just like, oh, I made a health bar. Like, it's not interesting, right?
Yeah. Well, that makes me think about your. You mentioned earlier that you said that you're very strategic about how you develop games, and it sounds like you're very strategic about YouTube as well. And
a little bit,
if it's not paying off, if there's no real career move, I think a lot of YouTubers will just say, look, it's just not worth uploading every week. It's just not worth it if the career results aren't there. And I don't see anything wrong with that. YouTube is insanely time consuming.
Yeah.
And that's why I do these podcasts, because it's like, it's just easier to make content and people seem to be enjoying them. So I'm happy to do them. It's just a conversation. I get to meet, insanely talented developers. But yeah, it's a huge time suck, and game dev as a whole is a huge time suck as well.
Yeah.
Especially just even like talking with Jonas Tyroller last week, his entire strategy, and I want to talk about strategy in just a second, his entire strategy of building Thronefall and using sort of this prototypical approach was super duper fascinating to me. But it seemed like such a massive time suck to spend on the front end of development, spend all this time not only making YouTube videos, but doing, how many prototypes did you do? I think he did like 20 or something. Is that true for you in your game dev approach? Do you have a very precise approach for making your games? Or do you sort of just wing it and shoot from the hip?
No, I don't shoot from the hip really. But I don't do a bunch of prototyping either. So I guess it kind of goes hand in hand with like what I was doing with YouTube. So I finished Punch a Bunch eventually, and I was making those videos, and I finally started getting like actually a lot of views on YouTube. Like some of the videos had like 1 million or 2 million views on them, which is like insane for a devlog if you think about it. That's not what you get on devlogs, right? So I was like, okay, well clearly I'm doing something right here, right? And then I finished Punch a Bunch, and I had already like started prototyping a little bit, because I was like, you know what, maybe I can make my Bennett game after this game, now that I have some traction on YouTube. I have some people following me. Punch a Bunch sold. I had a goal of 10,000 units for Punch a Bunch, and I surpassed that, which was great, but not by a lot. So, I had some money. I think, in the first year it made probably like, $150,000 or something like that. And, if you split it out over 3 years, that's not a lot of money, No. I mean,
after
it is
tax as well.
You get taxed a lot in Canada, which is where I live. And, but it was good. And also I made the money all in 1 year. So then you have to pay super tax, right? Like you can't just...
That's right.
Yeah. So,
super tax. That's right.
Yeah. So, it was good, but I was like, well, I mean, what if I make my next game and it sucks, right? Yeah. So it's like, okay, next game, I put a goal up. I was like, okay, 100,000 units. Next game I make, I want to sell 100,000 units. And then I was like, okay, and then I had to make a very difficult decision about YouTube. It's like, should I make devlogs? Should I not make devlogs? So that kind of comes back to what you were asking before. Like, have I just abandoned my audience? If you're listening... Yeah. Sorry, dude. No, I'm just kidding. Look, I had to make a really difficult decision, and I had to decide whether, like, should I make devlogs about this game or should I not? And I was like, well, what is most beneficial for the game? And I was like, if I make devlogs, I'm going to have to spoil the whole game, because otherwise, what do you make devlogs about, right? And I really wanted it to be like... And I thought about that, because I was like, I want the people who watch the video... I want them to want to play the game. And I don't think that's a bad thing to want. Like, I was like, and so what can I do to make people want to play the game? Well, I think one of the main things that, drive us forward as a species is curiosity. So if you make a bunch of devlogs about your game where you're showing literally every single aspect of it, unless it's like some super mechanical game, maybe like Factorio or something like that,
sure.
For me,
like open world or creative,
sure.
And they can play the game and be part of the community as it's being made.
Totally. But for my game, I feel like a big... so the way I designed the game is that the climbing game is that there are different sections, right? And they're kind of different from each other. Like the first section is sort of like this rainy, moody, sort of West Coasty vibe, I guess, which is where I live, and so it's inspired a lot by the nature here. But then you enter this jungle, and then all of a sudden you're in this like sort of ancient Roman thing, and so I kind of thought like, you know, hey, a big part of the game is like, because it's a difficult game, right? And you fall down a lot and you have to start over, but you have to always motivate the player to want to keep going, right? And so I thought a big motivation would be that the players want to explore the next, like what's gonna come next, right? Like I just don't know what to expect anymore. And I thought by making a bunch of devlogs, I would kind of ruin that. And then I was like, well, nobody's gonna want to play it, right? So I made a really difficult decision to just not make any videos at all about it, because I thought that would be better for the game, to just keep it a secret and keep people guessing. And obviously, as usual, I had a timeline of 6 months. I wanted to finish the game. It took a year, so I was thinking that there would be like sort of like the 6 months break from YouTube, which turned into a year.
Dude, that's still really good. Like to hit a year with that game is incredible. And you were solo as well.
I was,
which is really impressive.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised now. Sometimes when I think back at it, and I didn't even work that much. I worked like between 6 and 8 hours a day, I would say. So I was like, how did I do that? I'm doing something new now. And I'm just like, man, the pace is low compared to before.
And you made all of the assets, well, the majority of the assets you made from scratch, right?
Yeah.
Why? Now, first off, that came off really bad. First off, I'm super impressed. What drove you to desire to make all those assets from scratch? When in reality, you could have taken a bunch of like mega scans, you know, and just put them into the game. Even though I will say the game looks incredible, don't get me wrong, but there is that temptation, right, to just throw in assets and call it a day.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think it depends on the game, but a huge contributing factor to that was, remember that game Only Up? Remember how that's not on Steam anymore?
Oh.
You want to know why?
Lawsuits.
Yeah, because they grabbed, or he or whatever, grabbed a bunch of assets off the internet that were supposedly free to use, but had just been re-uploaded by someone, and they didn't actually have the legal capacity to upload it. So I was like, I got super paranoid. I was like, okay, so you can't trust anything. So I was like, you know what, I'm just going to make everything myself. But also, it makes it so that the game feels more cohesive. Because if I started using... It
does feel cohesive.
Yeah, like if you use mega scans, it looks too photorealistic. I don't think it would work in the game. Like it's supposed to be a little cartoony, right? So if I started putting mega scans in there, I don't think it would have the right aesthetic, I guess.
I agree. I think there's something like, dude, I think there's something subconscious where players know whether a game was an asset game or not.
Yeah, you don't want it to feel like an asset.
And they might not be able to pinpoint exactly why, but they could feel it. It's kind of like AI art. You just know.
Totally.
You can just sense it.
Yeah, you just feel it. You want it to feel custom, like it's like intentional, right? And the thing with the climbing game is that it's like a lot about the surfaces, and you know, like it's a game about surfaces. That's what I always said about the game. It's not a game about climbing, it's a game about surfaces. So you have these slippery surfaces and the more grippy ones, and then the moving objects and all that stuff. And so I was very like intentional with how I made them look, so that it would be clear to the player, you know, what can you climb on, what is not grabbable, and all this stuff. And so I did try early on with just like I found some rocks or whatever on the Unity Asset Store, and it just wasn't really working, right? I think Bennett did that, and I think it works because it's so simple. The hammer touches something, and that's it, right? It's not really that complicated. But in my case, it's really about like where you have to really look at the surfaces, and so it was just too hard to find stuff that felt right and was cohesive. So that's why in the end I modeled it. But you know, I have a long career in VFX, so I was using Blender and stuff to make assets, and I'm pretty good at it. I'm pretty fast at making them, so it's not really a big deal for me. So I felt like an okay approach to just make the assets.
Humanoid characters, though, you refused to make that.
Yeah, I didn't do that one, did I? Well, what's the point, right? Like if you can find something.
I agree. You
know, I actually did it a few times. I did find some assets that I didn't make myself, but what I did do is that I textured it all myself, so that to make sure that I had a style of the textures at least.
Sure.
And that worked.
Sure.
So I mean, yeah.
Man, dude, that is so freaking impressive that you did all that, because we basically did all of the artwork from scratch in Twisted Tower, which is what we're currently working on. It's a Bioshock, but Disney World kind of game. And I recall telling my team, and the 3D artist, his name is Felipe, he's brilliant. I told him at the beginning of the project, I was like, please just use assets. Like, flip them. Let's just get this done. Let's not worry about creating everything from scratch. And if he's listening, Felipe, I love you. He would go ahead and make them from scratch anyway, and then tell me later. And so every day, at the end of the day, there was a bunch of new assets that were created from scratch. And so I'd keep telling him, use assets. And looking back now, with the advent of AI crap and just the asset flip games flooding the Steam market, I just want to give him a big hug, because his principles, his gut principles, were correct and mine weren't. And I think that there is a huge gap in the indie game market for games that they just have that from scratch look. They just feel handmade, homemade, human games. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it's probably better to make a game that looks bad than a game that looks good but looks like an Unreal 5 engine game. Like, I'm getting the moment I see Unreal Engine 5, I'm just like, yeah, I don't think so. It all looks the same, and it's like, even like kind of like the Harry Potter game, which was cool. I was like, this looks like Unreal Engine 5, and I looked it up, and sure enough, it was Unreal Engine 5, right?
Well, what do you mean by that? So I know what you mean, but I want you to clarify it for the audience.
Right.
Why is it a problem that Unreal Engine 5 has a look? Why is that a problem?
Because it makes your game look too much like, it makes your game feel generic. And there's nothing worse than if your game feels generic, right? And you might be like, oh, well, your game looks like Bennett's game. But my game is very similar and probably appeals to the same audience as Bennett's game. And not a lot of other games look like that. So it was a very intentional decision, and I hope Bennett isn't offended. He didn't seem to be on Twitter, but I couldn't be sure. I was just like, I'll just go for it. Like, it's just a bald dude in a loincloth. Like, it's not really that specific, but...
No, dude. No, he's not offended. And I saw his tweet, and he seems
cool with it.
He seems cool with it. And I think, look, dude, if your game looked like there's a game called Rollerdrome, very stylized.
Sure, yeah.
If he had created a hyper stylized look, and you like copied that look, I'd be like, bro. But like, the style of your game is fairly realistic with a little bit of stylized.
Yeah.
So I don't think you copied anything that was like fundamental to his aesthetic.
I mean, if I swapped out the character for something totally different, I don't think you would associate so much with Bennett's game anymore. It's really about that bald guy, naked guy, right, or whatever. But it's like I had a lot of like, I spoke to Jonas Tyroller like a month or so before release or something, and I showed him the trailer. I was like, hey, could you just look at this and let me know what you think, and look at my Steam page, like. And he was like, yeah, this is looking good, man. And I was like, yeah, I'm kind of worried that people are gonna think that I'm just like copying, because it's not. I was like, it's not a copy of Bennett's game. Like, I put a lot of effort into making. He said, yeah, it only took me a year, but I put a lot of effort into making the game feel unique and to have like. And so I was like, I was worried that people would just, it's just a copycat game. And Jonas was like, yeah, well, you're going to get a lot of that anyways. Doesn't matter what you do. But I think it's probably good because you actually want people to associate your game with something. Otherwise, they just have no idea what it's about. And that made a lot of sense to me. I was like, yeah, you know what? That makes sense. And I guess intuitively, somehow, that's why I did it. But... it really made sense when he said that. I was like, yeah, that makes perfect sense.
There's two things going on there. And by the way, I know exactly how you feel. I'm making a game that looks like Bioshock.
Yeah.
And I guess I can say this out loud, but I'm pretty sure Ken Levine is coming on the podcast. He and I have been messaging each other. And for those who don't know, he's the creator of Bioshock. But point being is I was so freaking paranoid, and I was calling my publisher. I was talking all over the place with people, my subscribers, like, hey, do I need to make this game look toony? Do I need to make it look different? Like, what do I need to do? Because it looks so similar to BioShock. And my biggest fear was people buy it because they expect BioShock, and then they don't get BioShock.
That's a big problem. You have to deliver on it. Yeah, totally.
That's right. The problem is this, and this is what I struggle with, is sure it's not going to be as good as BioShock. There's no way. Like, there is no freaking way. It's a, I don't know what the budget of that game was, 50 million?
Yeah, but like, you don't know that because, like, what was the budget of Animal Crossing? No, not Animal Crossing. What's the game? Harvest Moon. What was the budget of that? I don't know, but it was probably more than Stardew Valley. And Stardew Valley sure sold a lot more copies than Harvest Moon ever did. So you don't really know that. I think you just have to, I mean, look, I think that you were asking about game development and how I approach it and how I'm methodical about it. So, like, I'm a pretty methodical person. I like to have things be, semi-structured. Maybe you can tell I'm a very chaotic person. So if I don't have like a structure, then I just get nothing done. So you're gonna have to just reel me in if things go sideways here. Hopefully, you listening, you're just gonna have to sit through it, and hopefully you get something out of it.
Dude, that is what I was told. Side note, I was told that's why people like listening to the podcast, because it's very real, it's honest, and we're just chatting. So Don't worry about it. Keep going on side tangents. I love it.
I mean, I guess a lot of people, I don't really know who listens. I listen to your podcast. I like your podcast. It's like I wasn't really watching you a lot before because you're, like you said, you're kind of teaching and you're appealing to probably a bit of newer developers. But I find the podcast to be really nice, and I feel like I got to know you a lot better through just watching. So I guess, super parasocial now. I don't know. But I think it's really great, and but I'm guessing there's mostly developers. So I think we can kind of nerd out a little bit, I guess. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's developers. It is developers.
Okay.
We can nerd out. And that is my target market. It always has been.
Okay.
So nerd out.
Here's the thing when you make a game, right? Like, I can only speak from my own experience, but what I did with my last game, and which is definitely what I will keep doing moving forward, is you can't, like, I don't approach things from I want to make money perspective, right? I approached it from like, because I'm a very picky gamer. I'm not the type of person who just like plays all games and just like sinks thousands of hours. Like, I think PUBG I have 250 hours on, which is like my top game, and everything else is like, that's like my most played game. And so I don't play like crazy amounts of games, and I'm a late adopter. I wait for people to play the crap out of games before I play them, so that I'm like, okay, this is probably good. I'm probably gonna like it. I rarely buy things on launch and stuff like that. I think you shouldn't work on a game that, like, if you played Stardew Valley or Dark Souls and you're like, damn, I would love to make a game like that, and then you make that, it's like, well, guess what you just did? You made like a watered down version of whatever game you were playing, right? And it's like, I don't think that's the right idea. I'm more like, if I play a game that I'm like, dude, I just want more of this, which is what I felt with Bennett's game. Like, I was like, oh, this is awesome. This is great. Like, this is gonna revolutionize the game dev industry, because it was, at the time, games were bigger. It was more about AAA, and it was kind of that shift, the indie game shift. It was still happening, and like I'm also like a late adopter. I tend to buy games after they've been out for a few years and gotten some good reviews and stuff. So I'm kind of also behind the curve a little bit, but it was one of the first games that I played that was made by one person. Right. And I was kind of dreaming of making games, and I was like, dude, this is like, I could do something like this maybe, right? Like, it sparked that spark, I guess, in me. Yeah. I was like, this is awesome. Like, you make a little game that is hyper focused on just this one mechanic that a AAA studio couldn't dream of making, because it wouldn't make enough money. Yeah. And so I was like, dude, this is gonna blow up. There's gonna be so many games like this. And there just wasn't, and I was kind of disappointed. I was like, where are all the Bennett games? Like, and where is Bennett? Why is he not making a game? He still hasn't made a game since that game, right? Like, he's working on one, which I'm going to play, obviously, but it's been a long time now. So I was like, where are all the games? And yes, there are games like Jump King and some other, like Alt F4 and these kind of rage games, but the way I looked at my game is that I never classified it as a rage game. I kind of called it a rage light. Like, like, obviously it has the rage element of falling down and starting over, but I wanted it to be that every time you climb back up, you're learning something, and that the controls are sort of strange. And I wanted depth in the game. Like, my dream was that it could take you 20 hours to beat the game or 3 minutes, right?
Right.
Based on your level of skill and everything. And I wasn't sure if that would be the case, but luckily, actually, that's exactly what happened. I think the world record is sub 3 minutes now.
Holy crap!
Which is pretty crazy. Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Are they glitching it out, or
no? That's like, because it's physics based, right? So they were doing all these weird maneuvers to make these super long jumps and doing all these like skips and stuff, but it's no glitching. And I'm so like, that's probably the biggest satisfaction of all of this. Like, just seeing the speedrunners really push the game to the limit. Like, I've been trying myself. I think I can do 8 minutes or something like that, but I cannot even begin to compete with these people.
So you had a game idea that was based on a core game mechanic, and everything else was secondary to that single mechanic.
Yeah, man, I started like the first draft of the game. I just made it all with like white boxes, like no materials. Like, it starts with the game mechanics.
Yeah.
If it's not fun when the game looks like crap, it's not going to be fun when it looks nice, right?
Exactly.
It's got to feel good when it looks bad, and then you can, kind of start dressing in things, and then it feels even better. But it's got to be fun at its core, I think.
Yeah. Was Punch a Bunch fun at its core?
I think that there are elements in the game. Yeah, I'm proud of that game. It's not the best game. I recognize that. It's not for everyone, for sure. I have seen a few people like writing to me saying like, I played the game and I hated it at first, but I've since played it and I completed it. I did all the achievements, and
sure.
I really understand what you were trying to do with the game. And it's like, yeah, that's really nice to see, because I really did have a vision for the game.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it didn't really come across that clearly.
So it was a marketing issue?
Yeah, and when I say marketing issue, it's like, if you look at the graphics, it looks kind of like a kid's game.
I see.
Bright colors, blobby characters, simple designs, but then the game is actually quite difficult, and it's got some, like, you need to be very good at coordinating, which kids aren't generally, so it's like a total disconnect there. The game shouldn't have looked the way it looks. So that's probably my biggest mistake with that game.
Well, how would you have done it differently, the look? Like, what would you do?
Probably just a bit like, I don't know, probably a bit grittier, but at the same time not. Like, it was a humorous game, so...
Yeah.
I don't know. Actually, I've thought about that, and I don't know, because the reason I did it the way it was because like, I need to make YouTube thumbnails that catch people's attention. So I'm gonna use like these super saturated colors like red, yellow, and blue. Right. I don't like green, so there's no green in my games.
That's
I don't
so
like
funny.
The color green.
Me neither. It's always a neon yellow. I always choose that over.
Yeah,
over
that's
green.
True. Yeah, you have your color scheme. Never green. Yeah, I don't like green, so that's why I picked those colors. But I primarily I picked the color and the design for YouTube thumbnails, which is kind of weird, but that's how it started. And I just I wasn't experienced at the time. I was just like doing things to do them, and I just wanted an excuse to make videos and just, try it out, right?
Yeah.
So it was definitely not a very well thought out look, whereas my new game is way more thought out. But to answer your question, like, what is methodical about my game development is that I don't like to take a lot of too many chances, and like I said, like, the goal was to really reduce our expenses and make sure that we could actually survive and not having to go back to work, or so, because like, I think that you don't want to like making money is seen as a bad thing in a lot of people's eyes, and people might be disappointed that I'm making fewer videos and all that stuff, but all the things that I've done so far has really led to where I am today, and it's allowed me to continue making games. And I feel like it would be a bigger disservice to everybody if I just kept pumping out half-assed videos and then eventually had to go back to work and quit this altogether. Like, I think it's better if I show up once a year than never, ultimately, right?
Yeah. No, that makes sense, man. That makes sense. You know, I'm trying to figure. I was watching your video about the development, and it's almost like, it's a great video, by the way. To everybody listening, you've got to watch the production or the behind the scenes video of the climbing game, because
thanks, dude.
It's amazing. It's such a good video. I watched the whole thing, and I usually don't watch the entire YouTube videos. I watched the whole thing, and something that really struck out to me is, it's like, maybe it's just the way you edited the video. I don't know, because I've done this where I just I skip over a lot of stuff, but it seems like you knew what the core gimmick was from the start, and it's like, that is such a rare thing with making games. When everything is just manifest immediately in your brain, and you're like, holy crap, I know what this game is, and now I just gotta put the code and the models into Unity, and we're good. Is that how it came about? Was it just an idea that manifested itself, or was it actually a very lengthy, I guess, prototyping process?
I mean, I made the game in a year, so it wasn't that lengthy, but I would say I probably spent 3 to 4 months just fidgeting around with the controls. And yeah, no, I was definitely not like that clear cut, because I did, like, I don't know, yeah, like in the video I mentioned that I thought that it could be turn based first. Mm-hmm. And that was clearly a bad idea. So that's kind of how it started. And I was like, it feels too slow. It's kind of boring. This is not speedrunnable, right? Like, it just felt boring, right? So I was like, what if I just made it like real time, like live, right? Like you grab with each button and let's make it faster. Like, let's make it fast, right?
Yeah.
And then I started doing I just started like mashing in a bunch of assets and stuff, and you could climb on them, and there was no friction or anything like that. It was just like climbing. And I was like, this is just boring. It's just like the only tricky thing is jumping. So it's just a bunch of jumping, and that's boring at the end of the day, right? Like, you can't, like, it's only fun for so long, right?
Sure.
And so I was like, well, what can I do to make it interesting, right? And I remember, do you know the game Worms?
Uh-huh. Oh yeah, grew up on that.
Yeah, so you know how it's like all hand drawn, and there are all these different things. Like, there's a pineapple here and there's a thing there, but the surfaces, they don't correspond to anything. Like when you place a grenade, like it'll blow up an equal hole, and it has nothing to do with the art. And that's kind of what the game felt like. Like, you were just climbing on random crap, and it wasn't like you just stopped looking at the environment.
Sure, it wasn't really thematic with different biomes.
Yeah, it just felt like it's just whatever. You can climb on anything. And so I was like, I spent a lot of time then. I was like, I gotta make it so that people look at the game. Like, I want people to look at the environment and really stop and think like, holy shit, what do I have to do now? Like, wait a minute, no, I can't do that. And so I really thought a lot about how can I make people pay attention to the game and not just like, oh, here's a jump, and that's when I came up with like, what if the different surfaces have different properties?
Yep. That was brilliant, dude. I think that was probably the most brilliant, after the core game loop of the hands. I think that was your most important discovery of creating that game. The surfaces are just incredible, and it totally separates you from the other game, right? Which is a hammer, and this is actually it's actually all about surfaces. It's a totally different game. It's just got the same. It's a rage game about falling, but other than that, it's basically a totally different concept.
It is, yeah. It's got the same like physics-based stuff, and there are a lot of similarities, of course. But I do think it stands on its own two legs, and I've seen a lot of people saying that they approached it thinking it was just going to be a clone, but then they actually really ended up enjoying it. So, but yeah, I do think like once I figured out that it's a game about surfaces, that's when it kind of just clicked, and it was just about finishing it up and polishing it.
Would you agree that games manifest themselves to the developers, and the only way to discover what the game is to make the game?
Yeah, partially. Yeah, I think so.
Or is it you should be able to plan it out entirely, or like pretty close to entirely, before you even open Unity?
No, I don't think so. For me, it doesn't, at least. I mean, maybe you could do that, but I think if you do that, you're going to be making a very structured, predictable game. Like maybe Factorio could be made that way, partially.
Yeah.
But I don't like use GDDs, like game design documents or anything like that, because it's for me, like, so I didn't do any playtesting for the game, which is kind of weird, I guess. For a game that's about a difficulty curve, right? I kind of chanced it, and I was like, I'll just play test it myself, and that'll be good. I think it worked largely. There were a couple of areas that were a little bit too difficult, it turns out, but other than that, I felt like it was pretty good. And I kind of made the game, like, as I was learning the controls myself, I just kept like making each section, like the better I got, like the harder I could make it, right?
Yeah.
So it was kind of like my own pace of learning the game that I created each step. So and then a lot of ideas just came from randomly testing things, right? So I definitely don't think you can plan ahead too much, because then you also get like boxed into something that might not necessarily be a good idea.
Sure. Like turn-based climbing.
Like turn-based climbing seemed like a great idea in my head, and then I tried it and I was like, this is not fun at all. So yeah.
Well, yeah, I think that's what I've been learning. I've been learning it from you. I've been learning it from Jonas Tyroller, which is, instead of trying to pinpoint all these different mechanics for an indie game, instead what you should do is pick one really great mechanic and just it's almost like dating. It's like growing in a strong, deep, intimate relationship with a single mechanic and nurturing that mechanic through the entire development process. Now, I've heard some people have tweeted me and said, man, that is a really sad state for the indie game industry, that you have to make tiny little games that are essentially gimmicky, right? It's like one little gimmick. And I'm sitting here thinking, I guess maybe that is a sad thing, but what else are we supposed to do? Like, there's limited time, there's limited team size. We don't have the money or the time to create all these complicated mechanics.
Why is that sad, though?
Because what the end result is a bunch of small games that are quote unquote like gimmicky.
Yeah, but on the other end of the spectrum, you'll have something like Horizon Zero Dawn, which I know a lot of people like. I can't stand those games where it's just like, hey, why don't we have every game in this game? So we're gonna have like, I'm so done with playing these games have like, looting and crafting and questing and collecting and house building and farming, and it's just like, it feels like every game has all of those things now, and there's no thought whether that actually makes sense in the game or not. And so I just feel like that's something I really like about Dark Souls and From Software's games. Like, I didn't play them for a long time, and just a few years ago I started playing them, and at first I hated them, but then I came around and I really started like feeling like, okay, this is good stuff. Like, some people say there's a story in Dark Souls. There's no story. Anybody who thinks there's a story in Dark Souls is on crack. There's no story. The story is you beating the game. That's the beauty. Like, that's the story. You're thrown in this world where you have to like just learn to get through the game, and there's no farming, and there's no gimmicks, and there's no like distractions, right?
Yeah.
Sekiro even more so, even better actually. That's my favorite of their games, and there was something about that really resonated, and that's what I carried into this game that I made. I was like, okay, that's what we're gonna do. It's gonna be a game about climbing and a game about surfaces. There's not even gonna be a main menu. There's not gonna be any music. There's not gonna be anything, right? It's just gonna be that, climbing. Like, you start the game and you start climbing. There's no like I've started becoming very allergic to games that have a bunch of text and tutorials, and just let me play the game, you know?
Yep.
So that's just, I mean, that's a very personal thing, right? But that's for me how I play games these days. Like, I'm a huge fan of, like, one of my favorite games is The Witness, John Blow's game.
Sure.
I played it a lot. I really like it. And it is something really satisfying about how the game starts. It does have a start screen. Big mistake. No, just kidding. But
it could have got away without it, you know?
It could have. You just start in this tunnel and it's like,
yep.
You know, like there's no like, press like up to move forward. It's like, duh, like clearly, like eventually the play, because I grew up on the Nintendo and Super Nintendo, and there were no instructions. And I was Swedish. I didn't speak any English, so whatever blurbs they put on the screen was like, if I needed to be able to read that to play the game, I didn't play it.
Yeah, yeah.
So I just like started mashing all buttons just to see what would happen, right? And that sense of discovery was what made me really fall in love with video games, I think. Like, I feel like we've kind of lost that a little bit, where there's no sense of discovery anymore, because game developers are so concerned with like, oh, look, there's a huge game and there's all this stuff back there and there's a bunch of hidden secrets over here that you can go and find out about, and to go get them you just have to do this one thing, and it's like, sure. It's no longer a secret, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And so for me, if I had a goal with game development and how I like to do things moving forward, is to maintain the sense of mystery, which is why I stopped making so many YouTube videos, because I think it ruins the sense of mystery. And I am a big fan of mystery.
That was a really beautiful, but that was a long answer to the question. And it was necessary. No, but it was necessary. And I think you've justified it. Because
all right,
I think you've justified your absence, because I love that. But the problem with everything being mysterious is if your game is complicated, it doesn't work, right? Like if your climbing game was super complicated and there was a bunch of different buttons you had to press and upgrades and blah blah blah, you can't get away with just letting the player figure it out. It's like Super Nintendo games. They weren't super instructive because they were super simple, right?
Yeah, but I don't know, maybe people disagree with this, but I think there is a general sentiment that games used to be better. A lot of people say that. It's like, oh man, back in the day. I mean, I think there's a lot of nostalgia involved, but I do think that simplicity is the key to success. I
think so.
I don't like open world games with all this stuff. It just feels like watered down and bland to me. Like I much prefer something where it's like focused, like this is what we're doing right now, right? So at least personally. So I love the sense of discovery, right? Like that's so important to me. And when you have like all these tutorial and the Nintendo Fairy here and there, it just doesn't feel like I'm discovering anything.
Yep. We had me and my small team, we were making Twisted Tower, and then we were also making this game called Brave Boy. And it's about this little dog, and you have a sword and you hop around on, the Highlands in the Scottish Highlands. And there was a mechanic that I just loved, and it was basically like the Donkey Kong cannons. I don't know if you remember those, where you launch out of the cannons. They spin and then you press A, and that was sort of core to the game's demo, and it was just really stupid and really fun and silly. And I sent it off to a publisher, and I was like, "Do you want to invest in this game?" And they were like, we love how it looks, but we want you to make it open world. Can you try to make it open world? And we don't like the cannons. And I was like, okay. So we spent a month trying to make it feel open world. And the whole charm was just removed. But
that's what publishers do. They just ruin games.
I have found that to be true. And it's been pissing me off lately. So fortunately, 3D Realms with Twisted Tower, they've basically sort of just, they're gonna let me make it the way I want to make it. So thank you, 3D Realms, for doing that. But I have found that publishers, they tend to get their frickin' fingers in everything, and the problem is the reason they do it is because they're scared. They're scared the game's not going to make their money back. They're scared they're going to piss off their board, like their investors, or the board, or something like that. Yeah. And so there's this giant hierarchy of fear, right?
Yeah.
And that really does bring us back to sort of wrap this podcast up. It brings us a nice little bookend, which is you're in a position where you're alone making games. You've made good money on your games, and you don't have to live in fear. You just get to make the next thing and have fun. And that answers the question at the beginning, which is, do you feel less creative or more creative? And I think you said you feel more creative, right?
I don't know. I don't, because I haven't. I'm working on, which I haven't released yet. Mystery, you know what I'm saying? It's important.
That's right.
But I guess I can
do
give
a devlog.
little.
Come on.
Yeah, I guess I should give something for anyone who listened all this way to the end. But so I am working on a huge update to the climbing game. It will be a massive update that will expand it. Like the content I'm making for the game, like what I'm making is more than was in the original game. And it will be a free update, so don't worry. So if you're one of the people that crack the game, now is your opportunity to buy the game. I think it's on sale right now, actually. It's on the autumn sale. But just know that there will be a huge, juicy update coming to the game. I'm not going to say what it is, but it will be, I think it'll be fun. It'll be good. And so I definitely feel creative in that sense. Like I've been able to really sort of explore more about the game, and now that I've seen people play it, I've played it myself a lot. And so I feel like that's been very fulfilling to really sort of, because I made the game so quickly that I felt like I didn't really have time to really explore, like, what does it mean to have a game about surfaces? Did I really explore every nook and cranny about that concept? And at first I thought I did. I was like, there's not really anything else I could have done, but turns out there was a lot of stuff that I didn't think about that I've now kind of figured out, which also goes back to what you were saying before, like, can you plan it out on pen and paper? Like, no, because I thought I had done everything that would be interesting in the game, and now it turns out that I have all this stuff that I was like, man, why didn't I put that in the game? And so it's awesome to have an opportunity to be able to do that, and to be able to release it for free as a thank you to everybody who played. So, but moving forward, I don't have a game lined up that I'm gonna make after, so I guess we'll have to see.
Well, I think you're in a really good spot, dude, because you own, it's something like owning a patent, even though you can't really patent a mechanic like the one you've created. But you have this mechanic that is like a gold mine. You know what I mean? It's like that single mechanic of grabbing things and climbing things. You can just, dude, you could make 10 sequels to this thing, or like DLCs if you wanted to, and just grab all the cash. So I actually really respect that you're just going to include it for free, because you could do a $5 DLC and probably make $1 million minimum, right?
Yeah, so. Maybe. But yeah, that's why I'm like, and that's something I guess I should say as well, is like, if you do make a lot of money, like if I know you for example, and I know David Whaley as well, and a lot of other people, John Blow, like as soon as you guys make money, you just like pour some gasoline on it and burn it up. I don't know how.
I invest a lot of the money. I really do.
Okay,
I put it into places where it grows, but you do gotta spend some money back into your business, and
totally. And I never thought I would hire people, but I am getting to a point where I'm like, yeah, you know what, maybe I'll consider it. But first and foremost, I did exactly that. I invested my money, and so now it's like, even if I make a game and nobody buys it, I'm still going to be able to live off the investments. And I think that if you want to do games long term, I think you need to kind of figure out something like that, because you don't want to be constantly strapped for money and just like living paycheck to paycheck.
And full disclosure for anybody listening, just I like to be as honest and transparent. I make really good money from games, but I also make really good money from this channel and the resources and the courses and all that stuff. So people should know that my YouTube channel does generate a significant amount of revenue on top of my game studio. But that said, what I did want to say is there's this very interesting conundrum with business owners, which is, there's a book called Profit First, and I think every game developer should probably read Profit First, which is, the idea is, the moment you make money from, let's say, your game, you immediately, as fast as you possibly can, take I don't know, half of that money and you slam it into something that you can't touch. So like go buy some land, go buy some real estate, go put it in the stock market, put it in your 401k or your solo, and do not touch it. But there's also another mentality, and this is similar to what I've done. I've invested, but I've also taken money and significant amount of money and just quote unquote burned it on another project. And Jonathan Blow is talking about this as well. So it is kind of it's this balance. So everybody listening, when you're thinking about what do you do when you finally do make some money from your games, my answer is invest a lot of it and then be willing to burn a lot of it. And by burn, really what you're doing is you're investing it in another project and hoping that it creates more money. It's kind of like planting seeds, you know?
Yeah, of course. So, I didn't mean it that way, that you're just burning. I know. But you know what I'm saying, though, right?
Yes,
like that
100%.
It's like if you take all the money you make and you hire people and you overhire or whatever, and you make this new project that you believe in and it just tanks, you just ended your game career right there, right? And now it's time to go back to work, baby. And that's not fun. Nobody wants to do that.
I know. It's scary, too.
Yeah.
Dude, I don't know if I would hire. I don't know if I would. Well, I'll just say this. I personally, I want to feel out the game industry because it's changing. It feels like it's changing. So personally, what I'm doing is now that we've wrapped up Twisted Tower and now that the team is done with the project, and I've already told the team this, I'm just going solo for a little bit.
Yeah, man.
Because
that's a good idea.
Just to hear and feel out like, okay, wait a second. Can I actually make a game for really cheap? Do I really need a team to do this?
Hire when it makes sense, I think, right? Like you hire when you feel like I probably should have hired someone to help me out with what I'm doing right now, but at the same time, I'm kind of enjoying doing it myself, and it's giving me time to really think about things. And so I think that's a great idea. Hire when it makes sense. Don't just like... I mean, you know, I understand that you feel a certain responsibility to your team, and that it's like, well, I don't want to fire everybody, and because they kind of depend on me, and just say like, hey, I'm just going solo. But at the same time, it's like you might be able to hire them back. And I mean, I think long term, you'll be doing your team a disservice to just keep people on payroll just for the sake of it, and then like scramble and be like, okay, guys, we gotta make a game, and then nobody's actually excited about it, and it's just, you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean, and I'm anxious to get started with 2025. I've learned so much from this conversation. Have you? I really have, and I've learned a ton from Jonas Tyroller and Jonathan.
He's
Blow.
The man. I learned everything I know about game development from Jonas. He's the guy.
Well, he's I would say Jonathan Blow is kind of like an Elon Musk type character for game dev. And I would say something similar, not the political side of everything, but like just the brilliance. The brilliance of Jonas Tyroller is similar. It's like his brain just is like firing on all cylinders. He's someone to aspire to be like, and he's definitely someone that people should follow. It's a shame that you and him don't make as many devlogs geared towards game devs, because I think people could learn a ton from you. I'm not trying to guilt trip you, I promise.
That's okay. I'm immune.
You don't care.
I don't care. I mean, look, you got to do what's good for you, right? Like I think that I know people are like, oh man, why aren't you making videos anymore? You just took the money and ran. And it's like, yeah, and so would you, right? Like, I mean, in a certain sense, it's true, but I'm also doing what's good for me. And if I don't do what's good for me, it's not going to be good for you either in the long run. So I think, like, am I going to stop making videos? No, I have a ton of stuff that I want to do, but I want to make sure that it's good and enjoyable. I think that's really important.
Yep.
You know?
100%. Okay, link is in the description. Mr. PontyPants, link is in the description for Climbing Game. I'll do Punch a Bunch in the description as well. Is there anything else you wanted to leave our listeners with before we wrap up here?
No, I don't know. Thanks for listening. That's been awesome to kind of... The one thing the one thing I do miss about YouTube is that I feel like I kind of lost touch and communication with my followers. Like I feel like I was on a good stride. When I was making good amount of videos, it felt like we had a bit of a community going, and I really do miss that. And it's something that really pains me. So that's the only thing really that truly pains me. But I know that it would be detrimental in the long run. So I'm sorry to everyone who's disappointed, but I'm not stopping making videos. There will be more videos, don't worry. But
well, for the record, I am not trying to guilt you, and I am not saying that you should make videos. In fact, I'll be completely honest with everyone listening. I have dreamt about just dropping YouTube. It sounds kind of nice, but it's also a lot of fun. It's also profitable. I learn so much from game devs. So but it's tough. YouTube is hard, man. I do not blame you one bit for slowing down. I think that's fine.
Well, thanks, man. I'm glad you're pushing on. I'm really enjoying the podcast. Like I said, I've been binging your episodes. It's been really awesome. I've learned a lot. Jonas's episode was a huge highlight. I love that you had John on as well. I'm a huge fan. And I hope you get more people on. I've seen you've been tweeting people, so I hope they join in and we can keep this going. And I'm excited to watch more podcasts. I think this was a huge it was very needed. Like I feel like there wasn't really any serious game dev podcast out there on this level, and so I'm glad that people are joining in, and that's why I was like I'll join in too, because I want to, if people want to listen, then great, that's awesome, right? But I think it's a great thing to have this podcast.
I appreciate hearing that, dude. I really do. I think I'm gonna go all in with the podcast.
I like it. Do it.
It's similar to what you said. I'll be honest with you. I'm getting emotional right now.
Gonna do a bit of crying now.
I'm about to do a bit of crying in this very raw and real podcast.
Okay.
But I'm dead serious that the idea of simplifying my life and just doing the podcast and then just making games is just so exciting to me. So I think I might do it.
I'm excited about it.
Devlogs are tough, man. And doing all these talking head videos and top 10 ways to blah, blah, blah. I'm just like, I kind of just want to talk to game devs. Maybe start a Patreon to keep it afloat. And then
it's a good idea.
About it. Yeah.
I mean, look, I know we're dragging it out a little bit now, but by the way, I do want to say something. A lot of people are asking how Ziggy's doing, my dog. She was a huge part of Devlogs. She's turning 17 in a few months, so she's a bit blind and a bit deaf, but she's going strong. So she's still here with us, and we love her. And so for everybody was wondering, here she is, and she's good.
For some reason, when you said she's 17, I was like, I thought maybe that's Canadian years or something, because I was like, there's no way that my dog would live that long in America. But then I realized it's all the same. There's no conversion rate.
It's all the same. I think maybe the air is maybe a little bit cooler up here, but that's about it.
That might be it. Cool.
No, man. I think you're onto something with your podcast, and I think it's a really good thing. And with devlogs, here's another thing that I think about devlogs, since you mentioned that. I think when I started making devlogs, there weren't really a lot of devlogs out there. There was like Jonas and DevDuck and Thin Matrix and a few others. Mm-hmm. But there just wasn't a lot. So I was like, hey, look, maybe there's a space here and maybe there's an interest. And clearly there was. But I think that now there are just so many of them. Like there's just, I see like almost every day I go on YouTube, there's always a new channel with 60 views that gets recommended. There's like so many doing it that I feel that it's like, there's not really a gap in the market anymore for it. And so I'm like, well, I mean, does there have to be a gap in the market? No, but like what I'm saying is that by you not making devlogs, it's not like it's the end of the world, because there's so many other people out there doing it. So
I'm trying to figure out like what's the gap in the market with the indie game podcast scene, and it's like, well, there's not a gap. It's just the podcasts they're kind of low quality.
They're a bit low quality, and I think that a lot of people running podcasts lately, like they aren't interested in running podcasts. They just want to become Joe Rogan or whatever. Like it just feels like they just have the podcast for a way to make content and get views. But I find that like the questions they ask, it doesn't seem like they're they haven't researched their guests very much, and they don't seem to actually want to, you know what I'm saying? Like, it just doesn't seem genuine. It just seems like, so tell me about yourself, and then just kind of let the guest drive the podcast. Whereas what you're doing is like you have these questions, you're helping me because I'm this ball of chaos, and so it's been very helpful, which is why I haven't gone on podcast before, because I knew it would just turn into a big mush of whatever. No. I had faith in you. Hopefully it turned out okay. I don't know.
Well, one of the problems I have is that people always think I'm interrupting guests. They'll say, stop interrupting the guest. And I want my audience to thank me, though, because what I'm doing is I'm redirecting them to make sure that we stay in a good space that is interesting to the audience while also being a good conversation. So we'll see. We'll see what the podcast has. I mean, it wouldn't be awful to be the Joe Rogan of indie game dev, especially if I could sell it. If I could sell it for $50 million to Spotify, absolutely.
Yo, take the money. Take the money.
And then I'll never make a podcast again. I'll move to Canada with you.
Keep going. I love watching it, and we should do it again sometime. Maybe we can I felt like this was very broad. Maybe we can go more into something. Sure. I know you're saying that you've been on a mission about the state of the games industry, so maybe we'll talk about that.
Dude, if you want to come on and talk about 2025, we need to schedule it, because I would love to talk about your plan and what you think we should do. So maybe that's episode 2 of our podcast. How's that?
Sure. Why not? I don't know if I have an hour of information on that, but I'm sure we can make it work.
Yeah, we'll make it work, dude. We'll bring some beer next time, and maybe that'll turn into an hour. I think. Yeah,
I like it. Let's do it. Like a beer o'clock conversation. I like it.
That's right. All right, Mr. Potty. Ponty,
dude,
not Potty.
Thanks so much for inviting me on. Yep. I really appreciate it. And thanks everybody for listening and watching, and support Thomas. Give him some likes, subscribe. You know what I'm saying? Like, keep follow him on Twitter, because the way he gets guests is on our X, I guess. And by tweeting at people. So if you go and retweet it and like his tweets when he's trying to get guests, that will make them more likely to come on. So do it. Support.
Dude, thank you.
Yeah.
This is important. That was spoken like a true seasoned YouTuber who knows how to get traction. So you still got it in you.
Still got it, baby.
All right. Take it easy, bud. Cheers.
You too, man.
Hey, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed that conversation with PontyPants. I know I did. It was really, really fun. He's a cool guy. Hey, remember, link is below to learn how to make a game in 15 minutes. It's a free workshop, no gimmicks. Just click the link below. You'll get instant access and learn how to make a game, a 3D game in 15 minutes. And you'll be learning from me, a moron, which is great because, well, I actually don't know why that's great. Anyway, you'll like it. Click below.